He found her in the snow, and she gave him a reason to live. Snow fell that December evening in heavy drifting sheets, wrapping the forest in a hush so deep it felt as though the world itself had stopped breathing. The tall pines stood frozen, their branches sagging beneath fresh white weight. No birds sang, no animals stirred. Even the wind moved carefully, whispering instead of roaring, as if afraid to disturb the silence. Evan Calder pulled his thick wool coat tighter around his chest and continued his slow walk through the timber grounds. His boots crunched softly against the untouched snow. 7 winters. That was how long he had lived alone out here. 7 years since the small cabin deep in the Northridge forest had known another voice besides his own. 7 years since Margaret died. The woods had become his refuge. The trees never asked questions he didn't have answers for. The cold never judged his silences. Out here, grief didn't need explaining. Evan was nearly back to his cabin when something stopped him. A sound, so faint he almost mistook it for the wind slipping through the branches. He paused, listened. There it was again, a weak, broken whimper, thin, desperate, barely clinging to life. Evan turned slowly, his breath fogging in the air. The sound came from behind the old supply shed at the edge of his property, a structure he hadn't used in years. His heart began to pound. Carefully, he made his way through the snowdrifts, every step heavier than the last. And then he saw her. Curled tightly against the shed's back wall, half buried beneath falling snow, was a dog. A golden retriever. Her once beautiful coat was dull and matted, stained with dirt and ice. Her body was painfully thin, each rib standing out like the bars of a cage. A fraying rope tied her to a wooden post, barely long enough for her to lie down. Near her paws sat an empty sack of food and a cracked metal bowl, frozen solid. Evan's stomach twisted. Someone had left her here, not to survive, to disappear. The dog lifted her head weakly as Evan approached. Her brown eyes met his. They didn't hold fear. They didn't hold aggression. They held something far worse. Hope. That had already learned disappointment. Evan swallowed hard. Who could do this? He whispered, his voice breaking in the cold. Slowly, gently, he knelt and untied the rope. His fingers shook, not from the temperature, but from an anger he didn't know how to place. When he lifted her, he froze. She weighed almost nothing. Easy, he murmured, cradling her against his chest. I've got you. The dog didn't resist. She only pressed her head weakly against him, as if she'd already decided to trust him. Evan carried her through the deepening snow toward his cabin, each step feeling like a promise he hadn't known he was making. The cabin. Warmth greeted them the moment Evan opened the door. The small cabin glowed with firelight, the wood stove crackling softly in the corner. He laid the dog down on a thick blanket near the heat and fetched water. Just a little at first. She drank slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might vanish. Then broth. Her body trembled as she ate, pausing between every swallow to look up at him, as if confirming this was real. Evan sat beside her on the floor long into the night, feeding her in small portions, whispering nonsense words simply to remind her she wasn't alone. That night, he slept in his chair near the fire. For the first time in years, the cabin felt occupied, healing. The days that followed changed both of them. Evan learned patience again, warm water baths, carefully trimmed fur, soft words spoken into quiet nights. The dog grew stronger. Her eyes brightened, her steps steadied, her tail wagged, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. And something else happened. Evan felt himself waking up. He had been surviving for years, eating, sleeping, working, but now he was needed. That mattered. He named her Ember, because she had come into his life when everything felt frozen, and somehow brought warmth back with her. Ember followed him everywhere once she could walk properly, through the timber lots, back to the cabin, to the edge of the creek where he cut firewood. She never strayed far, as if she remembered what abandonment felt like. Spring and truth. Spring arrived slowly. Snow melted, streams swelled, the forest breathed again. One afternoon, a young couple hiking through the woods stopped near Evan's cabin to ask for directions. The woman froze when she saw Ember stretched lazily on the porch. That's Daisy," she said softly. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. The story spilled out quickly. The couple's parents had owned the dog. When winter came and city life called, they decided the old dog wasn't worth the trouble. They tied her up behind the shed on land they no longer cared to maintain. They told themselves someone would find her. They told their children she had been rehomed. Evan looked down at Ember, at the way she leaned into his leg without hesitation. "She's home," he said quietly. "Here." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. She knelt and stroked Ember's head, whispering apologies. When they left, they offered money Evan didn't need, but he accepted it. For Ember. The quiet ending. That evening, Evan sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the pines. Ember's head rested in his lap. The forest glowed gold. He thought about cruelty and kindness, about how broken things sometimes find each other when they need it most. "You saved me too," he said softly, scratching behind her ears. Ember sighed contentedly. Winter had tried to bury them both, but they survived. Together. If this story touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances and subscribe for more emotional, cinematic stories of hope, humanity, and healing. New stories every day. Stay with us.